What would make this an especially meaningful conversation for you today?
Any tips you can have, probably see what I'm doing wrong, be able to help me boost my score by any other points.
Yeah,
Probably
sure. Are there any particular areas you feel like you might be going wrong?
the logical reasoning. I have no idea what I'm going wrong at it. I just know it's going wrong.
Okay, well, what are you doing for it currently that you think might be mistaken?
I'm not sure if I'm not using as much of the tips suggested by the LSAT logical reasoning Bible. It breaks it into too many categories for me to try to juggle that and remember, okay, this is what I do for this category type of question, for this type. I've been grueling through several different types of problems and exercises and then answering the questions and then figuring out why did I get an answer wrong if I get it wrong, or why I got an answer right, and what do the wrong and right answers look like.
Yeah, okay. So what does your review process look like, or what do you think you could be doing differently in terms of detailed review of any problems that you have difficulty with?
I think what I'm doing wrong is sometimes I disagree with the right answer, but I can't see that connection, how they got to the right answer. Like there's a bridge missing. I look at the book and it tells me this is the right answer, but I don't see why sometimes.
Have you looked at any explanations or worked with anyone else in terms of like a study group or a coach or a tutor?
When sometimes we come at the same conclusion, or other times it just still doesn't make sense to everyone. I'm like, oh.
One thing that might be useful, of course, is to look at online explanations as well. I've created many myself. Others have created them as well, and they can help you see the problem from another perspective.
Okay. I will look into that. Are yours on your website as well?
Yeah, so they're on the website. I also have a YouTube channel where I've published video explanations for the vast majority of LSAT logic games. And you can also post in the LSAT Unplugged Facebook group to find other students who could share feedback and you could get advice from them. You can also post any questions you have about particular LSAT problems, and other people can chime in and give you advice.
Okay.
A lot of times students who have already completed the LSAT and scored well, they'll still stick around to help other students going through the process now. Because once you've learned the LSAT, you can't stay away from it. And that's been my experience as well, is that just hits you on such a deep level that your way of thinking has fundamentally changed. And so you've got to adopt this kind of LSAT mindset where you can see the exam from the test maker's perspective. And rather than arguing with the right answer, imagine how could they be correct and what is tempting about the wrong answer that still makes it wrong.
Okay. What do you think, how reasonable is it to get a score boost within, or what's the reasonable amount of score boost you can get within 3 weeks or a month's time?
Most likely just a couple of points for most people, but you never know. A single insight could change everything for you about your prep. If you find that you were approaching a certain question type incorrectly, or you find a more efficient approach, that could be a game changer for you. Or even changing a pacing approach, for example, or building up your endurance. If you had only done 1 exam timed and over the next 3 weeks you do 6 or 7 exams timed, your level of comfort with those exams could improve your score significantly. How many exams would you say you've done up to this point?
I don't know, probably about anywhere from 12 to 20 exams.
And those were full-length, 5-section, strictly timed exams? Good. And have you seen an improvement over the course of those exams you've done?
Not dramatically. When I first started, I started around 155, 57. Now I'm towards 161, 62 area. Not a big jump increase. I was looking for at least 10 points or so of what I was expecting. But that's not what has happened.
That is a good increase, but of course, I understand that you want more, and it is a bit of diminishing marginal return, so you'll have to fight more for every single point as you get towards that higher end. So I think working on your review process a bit more could help, and going beyond just the study group, posting online, looking at explanations, and really writing down your thought process and articulating it more and more to better see it from their perspective, specifically what makes that wrong answer wrong. It could be one little word that makes all the difference, or what might have discouraged you from picking the right answer, but what still makes it technically correct, even if it seemed unappealing at first glance.
What are your advices for logic games? Let's say you start a logic game, you build all of your diagrams, and it's going smoothly, and you get to one question in the middle, and you find out you made a horrendous assumption. Now, do you go back and review everything, or do you skip it and go on to the next game, try to come back at a later stage?
Yeah, that's an unfortunate situation. But if you have misunderstood one of the rules of the game, if you got it backwards or you misunderstood something or used the wrong variable, everything needs to be redone, unfortunately. There's not really a way around that, except at the beginning, when you're first going through the rules, double check everything. It only takes an extra second, but it could save you a lot of time in the long run.
Okay.
And in general, if you're just stuck on a particular question within the game, skip it and come back to it. Especially those global must be true questions, or global could be true, or global cannot be true. You do all your local if questions first to build up a library of hypotheticals that you can later draw upon when you're solving those global ones. So there's no reason that you necessarily have to do the questions within a game in the order given.
Okay. And one other question is for, I think my weakest area, especially in logic reasoning, is parallel questions, especially with the titles. Even when it comes into reading comprehension, which titles would best match these. I'm not sure how to go about that, or how I just go intuitively. Okay, this sounds right to me. This must be it. I'm not sure what the strategy to attack those types of questions.
Inevitably, they're going to be the most time-consuming questions. So I'd save those for last. And it really is just a matter of checking each one against the passage, looking for the exact shape of it. But they're extremely nuanced and difficult. So they're going to be more time-consuming. The only thing I would suggest to get better at them is do more of them. Look, you could even scan through old sections of reading comp and look specifically for passages that contain parallel questions and do only those questions.
Okay.
Just as a way to drill them. And that the same goes for even something like rule substitution questions or rule equivalency questions in logic games. They're tough because they show up so infrequently. If you looked at it in isolation, it might not seem that bad, but they're not even, like, their parallels might not even be every exam. But if you found a bunch of them and just did them in a row, I think you'd see some patterns in how you could approach them and improve significantly.
What are the big insights or aha moments that you were thinking about that can give you a big score boost in these different areas?
I think one of the biggest insights was really just deepening my review process rather than doing more exams and covering them only on a surface level, like looking at the credited response, looking at an explanation, just saying I get it now and move on, when really an hour later I wouldn't be able to repeat what I had just said. Like, I think slowing down and really forcing myself to articulate the reasoning behind the question, underlying all the tempting wrong answers and the discouraging right answers, or was there a certain way they increase the level of difficulty within a stimulus. So starting to see all the specific ways they increase difficulty, the masks they put on top of questions, learning what they were, allowed me to then remove them when I was encountering a new one. So things like using words like unless and except, until, without, or requiring the contrapositive, or requiring that you link together different conditional statements, or an answer choice that's tempting using all the right words but one little word going too far, or the right answer to the wrong question in an answer choice. Like, a lot of times for necessary assumption questions, they will include a very tempting sufficient assumption answer choice, but it's the right answer to the wrong question. And so seeing all those kinds of tricks and really cataloging them mentally or subconsciously even would allow me to better recognize them when they came up on future questions.
Okay. Would you be able to break down necessary and assumption more of a layman terms? I get it and I can explain it, but I don't think I get it enough or understand enough on an intuitive level.
Okay, so on a more intuitive level, I think about them like a very specific kind of must be true question, where they're not really giving you new information. A person who believes in the stimulus and is logically committed to it automatically is committed to believing all underlying necessary assumptions. So if there was an argument saying God created the world, then it must be the case that there is or was a God at some point. That is a necessary underlying assumption, incredibly moderate, not new information.
Okay.
And so that's why the negation test works, just as the negation test would also work on a must be true question, although I wouldn't bother using it there.
Yeah.
The reason it is more useful for necessary assumptions is because it could be an unstated premise of the argument where it wasn't directly cited in the stimulus, but the person speaking would be logically committed to that statement as well.
Okay, that makes it more clear.
Good. Any other struggles you're facing right now, you think?
No, I think just have to actually get past the procrastination stage and get back to studying for the exam.
Well, you're taking it in just a couple of weeks, right?
Yes, just a couple weeks.
Yeah, so this is crunch time. Give yourself a big reward at the end of the rainbow after on the other side. But for now, yeah, if you could do another timed exam or two per week plus detailed review, this is really the point to just get more comfortable with the pacing endurance as you wrap up.
I find that my score is at times, I'm not sure, based on more so luck of how well I do with the reading comprehension or the logic games. I've had multiple times where I've scored, get all the questions right on the reading comp and the logical games, but then I'll get to the logical reasoning and I might get 10 right or I might get 15 right, and it fluctuates. That's hurting my score quite a bit.
Is it typically that you're getting the more difficult questions wrong?
It's typically that I'm getting which is vice versa. I'm getting what the book claims to be the easier questions wrong.
Then maybe you're second guessing yourself a little bit too much.
I thought they were trying to, I always think they're trying to trick me on purpose and trying to, I guess, overanalyze a bit.
Yeah, and you can use your knowledge of the order of difficulty to your advantage. The first 10 questions are on average are going to be much easier than the ones that come later. And so you have to think to yourself that those first 10 questions, they're not meant to separate people in the 160s from those in the 170s. They're meant to separate those in the 140s from those in the 120s and 130s. So there aren't super complex tricks there. Those are the questions that your first instinct is probably right, especially if you've already achieved a score in the low 160s. That means you're proficient in the foundation of the exam. So those questions, your gut instinct is probably correct.
Okay.
So just trust yourself on those.
What do you do for well, how do you keep time, or what would you say, how do you keep time when you are taking the test? I kind of just instinctively have a time clock in my head, but I guess lately on some questions I find myself taking too much time, and when I get to the end I have to kind of rush and speed along.
Yeah, well, personally, I have an internal good rhythm for my pacing, so I don't worry too much about it. But I mean, the digital LSAT has a countdown clock on the upper right, so it's always there present with you. So you can use that to, on a literal sense, keep time. But in terms of pacing, I guess I have a good rhythm. I keep moving forward. And I guess the biggest thing I can say about pacing is that I avoid getting bogged down. Everything's worth the same. No reason to obsess over one question. If you find that you're investing minute after minute and nothing is clicking and it's not improving your understanding at all, then I would simply leave off there, flag it, hope to come back to it later.
And what would be a cutoff point or a time limit that's, okay, I've spent too much now, I need to move on?
If you want an actual number, let's say on a tougher logical reasoning question, let's say 3 minutes would be a good limit.
Oh, God.
I don't think of it that way, though. I think of it more like if I'm spiraling into like stress, just stressing out.
Okay.
And I'm not making any headway. I feel like I'm on a hamster wheel and nothing's moving forward. Then I feel like, you know what, this is not giving me a good return on investment. I'm not making any headway. Let me skip it, hope to come back to it, and then have a fresh perspective upon a second look. And I'm moving at a fast enough pace on the easier questions that I built up a time bank to apply to those tougher ones. So I typically can come back to all the ones I flagged, and I'll typically flag 3 or 4 in a section of logical reasoning.
Okay. Do you have any other tips for logical reasoning?
I guess know what your weak areas are. Know what those tough questions are that you're likely to want to flag. Like it could be a lengthy parallel question. It could be a principal application question. For me, it would also be things like science or philosophy with overly technical language. If I see those, I might not even attempt them at all in that moment. I might just flag them and say I'm coming back at the end because they're more time consuming, especially parallels and principal application. You're reading 6 stimuli, the stimulus plus the 5 choices, for the benefit of 1 point. So to me, that's the lowest return. I'd save that for last.
Okay.
If it was like a number 9, I might attempt it in that moment. But if it's a number 20, I know it's going to be tougher and lengthy. So I have no reason to want to do it right then. I'd rather attempt some of the other shorter questions that could actually be a little bit easier and then come back to those tough ones at the very end.
Does that same pattern of difficulty appear in the reading comp and analytical reasoning as well?
In a more vague sense, I suppose it does. I think that the first logic game is certainly going to be easier than the last logic game. But of course, the questions within a set do not necessarily get increasingly difficult. Although, of course, orientation questions are easy. Main idea questions are relatively easier. But they could have like a parallel question could be the 4th one in reading comp, followed by a more simple passage organization question later in that set.
Okay.
Awesome, Peter. Well, it's been great connecting with you today. Really enjoyed meeting you and getting to know you a bit more. What would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
The biggest insight is probably I think the most important part is probably what I'm not doing enough of is that deep review. I kind of review it and say, yeah, I get it. I get why the answer is right instead of trying to dive deep into it. So I'm going to try that and do that more often, see how well that helps.
Great. Awesome. Well, please keep in touch and let me know if you need anything at all as you move forward.
All right, perfect. Thanks again.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.